I will be demonstrate the human skull anterior and posterior view.
This is coronal suture, parietal bone. After the parietal bone is the nasal bone to sphenoid bone. After the sphenoid bone is the ethmoid bone to lacrimal bone. After the lacrimal bone is zygomatic bone to infraorbital foramen. After the infraorbital foramen is the maxilla, mandible, and the mental foramen. Let's go to the left side. This is frontal bone. After the frontal bone is the superior orbital fissure to occipital bone. After the occipital bone is the temporal bone. After the temporal bone is the middle nasal concha of the ethmoid bone to inferior nasal concha. After the inferior nasal concha is the vomer. After the vomer is the alveolar process in the upper part of the teeth and the lower part of the teeth. After the alveolar process is, let's go to the posterior views. This part is the sagittal suture. After the sagittal suture is the parietal bone. After the parietal bone is the lambdoid suture. After the lambdoid suture is the occipital bone. After the occipital bone is the mastoid process of the temporal bone. Today, I will be demonstrate also the human skull lateral view. This part is what we call coronal suture to parietal bone. After the parietal bone is temporal bone to lambdoid suture. After the lambdoid suture is the squamous suture to occipital bone. After the occipital bone is the zygomatic process. Zygomatic process to external acoustic meatus. After the external acoustic meatus is the mastoid process to styloid process. After the styloid process is the mandibular ramus. Let's go to the front part. This is what we call frontal bone. After the frontal bone is sphenoid bone. After the sphenoid bone is ethmoid bone to lacrimal bone. After the lacrimal bone is nasal bone to zygomatic process. After the zygomatic process is the maxilla, and the alveolar process is the upper part of the teeth and the lower part of the teeth. After the alveolar process is mandible body or mental foramen.